This video is sponsored by CuriosityStream. I've driven quite a few EVs in the past few years, everything from supercars like the Tesla Model S Plaid and Lucid Air Dream Edition, the Taycan from Porsche, all the way to affordable cars like the Volkswagen ID.4 and the Volvo XC40. Surprisingly great cars. But there's one elusive EV that I've had my eyes on for quite a while. Here's the premise. What if you could go 1,000 miles per charge, and it was 3 times as efficient as the other EVs out there? Oh, and did I mention you never have to charge it? Yeah, the dream of driving around for free might actually be possible. This is the story of Aptera and their really radical vision for a EV. So go grab your favorite drink of choice and put your feet up, and let's do a deep dive on Aptera Motors today on Two Bit da Vinci. The idea of a car that runs on pure solar energy is nothing new. In fact, the concept goes all the way back to the 1950s when General Motors unveiled their experimental Sunmobile. We've actually covered quite a bit of the history behind solar EVs. We'll put links to here. But for the majority of automotive history, the concept has never really come to fruition, either due to a lack of efficient solar panels or battery tech, or just a general lack of interest and therefore funding. But that all may soon change with Aptera's new EV. Now, if the name Aptera sounds familiar, it's because the company originally announced its concept all the way back in 2005. But solar efficiency and cost weren't what they are today, and lithium-ion battery tech and production and cost wasn't even close. These visionaries were too early, and they had to liquidate their company just after 6 years in 2011. All right, that's the story. Thank you for watching. Have a good week. No, I'm kidding. There's more to the story, luckily, because now we're in the middle of a reboot, and the original co-founders, Chris Anthony and Steve Fambro, have restarted their beloved Aptera as of 2019. As a guy who started 2 companies and is a bit of a dreamer, I'm telling you, I can imagine how sleepless the nights were for these guys, just begging and dying to find a way to make this car a reality. And I think they're kind of close. Plus, did I mention, they're in our backyard here in San Diego, California. After a decade of roadblocks, the company is now finally ready to unveil their latest evolution, one of the world's first solar-powered electric vehicles, an innovation that the company boldly calls a never-charge EV. After spending the day with the car, I've decided to make a reservation and buy one. To understand why, let's break it down to a few categories. By the way, Aptera is actually taking reservations right now, so if you're thinking about buying one, we would love it if you used our link in the description. First, let's talk about their solar panel technology.
We actually use cells that are monocrystalline, but it's a powder crystalline cell. So the surface is this iridescent blue, which is nice and kind of changes colors as you change directions. But the cool thing about that is it's held together with a copper matrix on the back. So if you break a cell like that, or you get a micro cracking in the cell, it doesn't actually lose you any capacity of the cell. This cell, even though it's broken, even if it was completely shattered, would probably produce about 95% of the power of a regular, cell that didn't have any damage. So for long-term viability, we want these solar packages to last at least 10 years. It's really the way to go, for shake and vibe, and the manufacturing process stresses the cell sometimes. So having a cell that's very forgiving in that regard is a good thing. And in terms of the solar package, every Aptera comes with the dash and the roof solar, and then you can add on the hood or the rear hatch.
Spec it all the way up for $900 extra, and the daily solar recharging goes from 16 to 40 miles a day. I'd go all the way here and get the $900 package. It's kind of a no-brainer for that price.
The hood is an easy add-on. The rear hatch, you do lose the glass, so you lose a little bit of rear visibility, but we have a great vision system.
So this whole area would be covered?
The whole area is solar.
Oh, that's what I want, yeah. Aptera's boldness and vision are truly inspired. For me, when I need inspiration or an optimism recharge, I turn to our sponsor this week, CuriosityStream. I've been a long-term subscriber. This week, I watched Super Solar Cells, an episode on a series I love called Catalyst. It's amazing what you can learn in just 10 minutes. For example, the solar panels on this Aptera are silicon-based, but it's gallium arsenide panels that power satellites in space. They're more efficient, but way too expensive for commercial use. Also, this episode has some brilliant ideas on how we might be able to improve efficiency for solar here on Earth, and it just might be the basis for a future video. With CuriosityStream, there's something for everyone, from history, nature, and true crime, to space, science, and technology. Watch a little CuriosityStream while you're doing chores like washing dishes, and turn the mundane into a moment of learning. Make this the year for inspiration, learning, and new ideas. Head over to curiositystream.com/2bit and sign up for a whole year for just $14.99. And check it out for yourself today. Huge thanks to CuriosityStream and you for making this video possible. Fully spec'd, the Aptera is equipped with 700 watts of solar, which is impressive considering it would take two 350-watt panels to match that, and those are massive. But do keep in mind you'll never get 700 watts of energy because the cells match the curve of the body of the car, and different cells will be experiencing different levels of sunshine during the day. But the solar panels aren't the whole story here, because if I compared that to my Tesla Model 3 and I had the same level of solar production, I'd be looking at 12 miles. So how is Aptera getting 40 miles? That's where this story gets really interesting, because if you look at their car, it looks like something straight out of the future. The Aptera was so striking when it was first unveiled that it was actually seen on the set of a Star Trek film in 2009. Yeah, this definitely ain't your old family station wagon. This is all to achieve the lightest weight and lowest drag coefficient possible. Its wind-cheating teardrop shape and fully faired-in wheels reduced the drag down to 0.13. To put this into perspective, an SUV like the Cadillac Escalade has a drag coefficient of 0.37, a family sedan like the Toyota Camry, 0.27, and a Tesla Model S Plaid, 0.208. The equation for air resistance is 1/2 the air density times the frontal area times the drag coefficient times the velocity squared. If you kneel down and look straight down the front of the car, that's your frontal area, or how much area you have to push through the air. The drag coefficient, then, is how clever the design is to reduce this impact. Here's a picture of some drag coefficients for some various shapes. It's pretty interesting. The vehicle is also incredibly light.
This is a sample of some of the composites that we use in the vehicle that you'll be driving. It's a sandwich core, and it's built under bag, so there's no kind of styrene emissions during the process. But what it gives you is a really strong composite structure that's 7 times stronger than steel by weight. And it's also a composite structure that bends and springs right back.
This reduces effect number 2, the rolling resistance, which is much easier to understand. It's the rolling resistance coefficient, stuff like how sticky the tires are and how wide they are, and the normal force or the weight in pounds or mass times gravity, if you're on the metric system, the right system. Anyway, so a 2,000-pound car like this would have half the rolling resistance of a 4,000-pound car like the Tesla Model 3. Combine this vehicle's weight and slick aerodynamic design make it incredibly efficient, up to 4 times more efficient than typical electric sedans, earning about 10 miles per kilowatt hour. According to the company, the EV can cover up to 1,000 miles on a single charge, a record breaker for the industry. Of course, the vehicle promises a major win for the environment as well. Obviously, moving further away from fossil fuels is always a good move. But even helping EV owners become less reliant on grid energy could be a potential win for the company and consumers alike. Now, this is a big one, as many EV detractors don't believe our aging energy grid could possibly cope with millions of EVs fast charging. If you'd like me to do a deep dive on this, leave me a comment, but clearly a car that doesn't need to charge at all would be a huge win here. But what about customers who live outside of sunny San Diego? Are you just going to be left in the dark? Aptera says no. While Aptera hopes you never have to charge, you always of course can. Their battery packs come in 25, 40, 60, and 100 kilowatt hours in capacity. But interestingly, because it can go 10 miles per kilowatt hour, even a standard 110 wall outlet like you use for your TVs and laptops could add around 15 miles an hour. So plug it in all night, and by 8 a.m., you'd have 120 miles. Now, you can still pay an electrician and install a level 2 fast charger, but honestly, you wouldn't have to. Going further per kilowatt hour solves so many problems. But now let's talk practicality. The Aptera is a 2-seater, and it has a bit of a hatchback in the back. What's interesting is our cameraman, Juan, was actually in the back filming. You can see that clip right here. It's actually not too bad. And the company even says, you fold the seats far enough, you can sleep down there and look at the stars. That might be a little bit claustrophobic, but your mileage, of course, may vary. But the fact of the matter is, the car is actually pretty roomy. Getting in and out seems like it would be difficult because of the monocoque construction, like a supercar. But headroom and getting in, because the car is a little bit higher off the ground, not that bad. So this now gets to the biggest challenge that they're gonna have. As you can tell, this doesn't look like any car that's ever been made before. And that's both good and bad. Oh, wow. it feels remarkably like a car.
It's definitely the most surprising thing about driving this is you would expect, hey, it has 3 wheels, like you should be able to feel a difference. But the way that we put the weight on those 3 wheels, you really wouldn't know. This is definitely like rough suspension. The Beta is a vast improvement, so we had that out on track last week, and the performance of that suspension is just far better.
So I didn't ask this earlier, but in terms of classifications, is this a car, is it a motorcycle, is there any differences in laws, or you need a helmet, just all those kinds of things? What could a customer expect?
Yeah, so unfortunately it's not very clear, and it depends by state. In general, it's much closer to a motorcycle than a 4-wheel car. Many states have specific laws about 3-wheeled vehicles. They call them autocycles. So if it's 3 wheels, you typically don't need to have a motorcycle license. So that is really nice. And then if you are enclosed or have a front windshield, you don't need a helmet. So we are both of those things. So you don't, in general, you shouldn't need any special license. Don't need to wear a helmet. You just jump in the car and turn it on and drive. It can definitely peel rubber pretty easily. So the in-wheel motors have plenty of torque. We'll have traction control on once we actually get to production to help prevent that. But should you turn that off, you can burn through your tires pretty quickly.
Kind of a Aptera track mode?
Yep. Yeah.
How do you see scaling up the composite part? Typically there aren't very many operations that are composite structures that are built in huge quantities, because there are some challenges there. What's your strategy, or how are you guys going to build 100,000 cars a year, 50,000 cars a year, whatever the number might be?
Yeah, having already led a huge composite operation, I feel very confident that we can accomplish those goals. The problem is there's very kind of brute force methods of composites that require a lot of labor. So getting consistent composite parts out of an operation that can do it at 40 parts a day is certainly a challenge, but I think it's something that we're well suited for.
We had a little poll. We're meeting Aptera tomorrow, which we asked them, and the number one comment was about like crash test safety and stuff.
Yeah, we have Roush Engineering helping us with our impact strategy. We have a frontal crush area that's much larger than other, typical small and medium-sized vehicles. It's hard to tell because it's such a weird shape, but by the time you get to our firewalls, what they call it in traditional automotive, to the nose of the vehicle, that's a ton of kind of crushable area, and that's what really counts in frontal and frontal offset impacts, is how much can you crush the material in the front of the vehicle before it impacts the real body of the vehicle.
So as Chris, their founder, just mentioned, it is a lot easier to get started, but can they build their 40 cars a day, which is their target? That remains to be seen. Luckily, they're really smart. They have a good strategy and a good leadership team, and they're working with the legendary Sandy Munro and Associates to really dial in their manufacturing strategy. What it comes down to is you got to figure out how all these different curves and all this carbon fiber layup is going to fit into a production strategy. I think they're going to be able to do it. They've expanded now. They have a different factory that they're moving into, and they hope to deliver cars by the end of the year. That sounds optimistic, but man, am I rooting for them. This is one of those companies that you just gotta love, because I love their mission, and I really think this is the kind of reimagining of EVs that we always talk about as being the key to not just building more efficient cars that look just like cars we used to have, but rethinking what you really need around town. Now, you can't put car seats in this thing, so I couldn't take my family on trips, but for most of what I do, I could use this car and never charge again. So that is a look at Aptera. Now, please do subscribe, because we will keep you updated when more news comes out. This is a company here in our backyard, and we will follow through and see what is going on with them. All right, but before we go, real quick, let's talk about the comments of the week. I think this one's a compliment, but Tobias says, "You look like the stepdad of Oliver Queen from Arrow." thank you. I want to take that as a compliment. He's a good-looking man. The second one comes from one of our really popular videos lately, the gyro bus, and TMacD says, great stuff as always. Love your branded flywheel. That is a shout out to Juan, who's our 3D guy in Blender. We put our logos in places that way if anybody else uses our footage, at least we can kind of attribute it. But anyways, he says, wish you had been my physics teacher a long time ago. Thank you. That is awesome. That is really cool to hear. Thank you so much. Check out other videos we think you're going to like. We'll see you next time.